What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the You Know Ball podcast. I am your host, Trill Bro Dude, and today, returning to the podcast from Forbes, Bleacher Report, and now of Liberty Ballers, we have Bryan Toporek. What's going on, Bryan?
Not too much. I'm happy to be here for the slop extravaganza that happened just like half an hour ago.
Yeah, unfortunately, this podcast just got ruined. I said when Shams tweeted that out, which is a good way to start the podcast, really. But when Shams tweeted that out, I tweeted I was working on a podcast, and he just tweeted it out.
Yeah. I know. We had reached out to Caitlin Cooper already to be like, hey, so can you come on our podcast next week? And we'll still have her because we love Caitlin. But I wish we had a little more time to digest the news before the Suns ruin everything.
It's very unfortunate, but that's the way that the slop drops sometimes, really, because it's like I have had so many podcasts where I record them and then they're irrelevant in 2 days. I've had so many streams and ideas and thoughts that are like completely thrown out the window. But that's what happens when the news cycle is literally 24/7 in the NBA now. Like, it feels like 24/7, 365. I was talking earlier and I was like I was talking to my buddy John Barchard from the Bell and the Birdman, and I was like, you guys have NFL season, right?
Mm-hmm.
And NFL season's like 4 or 5 months tops, even including like training camp and like the draft. There's so much off time in the NFL. In the NBA now, it's like there's literally like, I don't know, a week in August. Like, it feels like there's always something happening. Like, training camp starts in 2 months.
It's
insane.
There's always one star in like trade purgatory. Like, it was Ben last year. It's going to be KD this offseason. Like, you're going to be, on a vacation on like August 12th. And in the back of your mind, you're like, well, can I go out to dinner? Or is KD going to get traded right now?
I'm literally having that issue right now. I scheduled a vacation for the middle of August. And now I have to bring my laptop in case we have to do an emergency podcast. But it's fine. I like doing it, especially when it involves Katie. But kind of relating to this, to be honest, like, the Pacers max Ayton. The Suns immediately match it. They kill all the drama. It was a fun 15 minutes while we got to think, like, is Robert Sarver and really going to continue to ruin the Suns? And are they just going to be cheap as fuck and not match him and let him walk for nothing? And they have said, apparently all along, they have been saying they will match a 4-year max. The whole point of this was apparently they didn't want the 5-year max so that they could get that designated rookie extension thing or whatever, because they wanted more flexibility. Whatever you need to tell yourself. They didn't want to bring Ayton back for max money. It's pretty obvious. They offered the 4-year max last year, but they didn't want to give him that last year, and any team could have offered him this. So, first off, what were the Pacers really thinking? Because it doesn't really matter. The players that they cut weren't guys that were going to be on the team next year anyway, except for maybe Dwayne Washington Jr. to make the cap space and make this offer. But like, I feel like in order to it seems like teams don't even make offer sheets anymore with restricted free agents unless they know for sure that other team isn't going to match. And the Suns immediately were like, nope, we're going to match.
Right. Well, I mean, at this point, there's no one left on the free agent market of real interest. It's like Ayton, Colin Sexton, and then like I wrote about it for Forbes this week. I think the third best player is like Montrezl Harrell. So It's like, who cares if you're tying up cap space for 2 days at this point? So I think that was one thing from the Pacers' perspective. The quote went viral, that the video clip went viral earlier this week about like, I think it was Wendy who was saying, Herb Simon doesn't like to do offer sheets. He likes to do sign and trades because he doesn't want to offend other owners. Like, God forbid, in the cutthroat NBA, you actually try to do something that makes your team better. So,
he's just always looking out for his fellow billionaires. They got each other's back. It's solidarity amongst the billionaires. It's so good to see.
I know. So, like, I'm guessing they tried to negotiate a sign and trade with Phoenix. Like, an Ayton Miles Turner sign and trade seemed to make too much sense not to happen. So, naturally, it didn't happen. Mm-hmm. I would guess Phoenix probably was like, no, we're just going to match. So, like, you have to offer more. Miles Turner and a pick, Miles Turner and 2 picks, whatever.
Right.
And in the end, it was like, no, we're going to call your bluff. We're just going to waive these, salary filler and Dwayne Washington. We're just going to sign him to an offer sheet. And like, okay, you can match it, but he doesn't want to come back. You have like just pissed on his value for most of a year now. You didn't offer him this contract back in October. There are these leaks coming out that like Monty Williams doesn't really like him all that much. Like he willingly took a back seat to Booker and Chris Paul for the last 2 years, played the good soldier, was a big part in the run to the finals. Like now maybe he is less amenable to, making those sacrifices. Maybe he wants his especially now that he got paid. So like, yeah, I get it from a business perspective. Cool. Like it makes sense. You got him locked in, for a year less. If you were concerned about that, the 5% raises instead of 8%, great job. But like, is it worth the damage that you did to that relationship with him moving forward?
Absolutely not. No.
Yeah, that I don't know.
Absolutely not. And the one thing I will say is like you said, the Turner for Ayton thing seemed like one of the few that could actually work. Because when you came on the podcast a few months ago, you were like, Ayton can't be moved for a straight up salary swap. It's not like 30 million for 30 million. It's got to be like 30 million for like 19 million or whatever the number was. And it was like exactly as much as Miles Turner makes. So we were all just like, oh, okay, well, Miles Turner isn't as good as Ayton. He's a little bit older. He's a little bit more injury prone, but like he's still pretty good. And like, if you don't want to pay Ayton, and that's your whole thing. Well, here's a guy who's about 80% as good and makes 12, 13 million less. So you can talk yourself into that. Like, all right, now we can, whatever we have in terms of, I guess the issue really was they weren't able to generate any more cap space. They wouldn't have been able to, like, maybe they would have had access to the full MLE versus the mini MLE if they maybe moved some stuff around, but I'm pretty sure they wouldn't even be able to get close to that. So ultimately, like, trading Ayton for Turner made a lot of sense just from like what the Suns did value. It seems like they want to put all of their resources into guards and wings, and then they want to just have like a replacement, not even a replacement level. Miles Turner's obviously above that, but like a above average starting center, basically. Right. And that's kind of what Miles Turner is. So I guess from the Pacers perspective, is Miles Turner just going to be on the trade block forever now? Is Miles Turner just literally going to be in trade purgatory for the rest of his life?
It feels that way, doesn't it? He's only got one more year left on his deal, if I'm not mistaken. So at some point, they'll have to either re-sign him and then put him right back into trade purgatory, or he will be free. And I mean, we've seen, the centers, except for Ayton, or like, Embiid, Jokic, Gobert, the top flight type of guys, like they're pretty fungible. They're pretty, you're not cashing in if you're Miles Turner. So like that is another reason that, given what Phoenix is doing, he could have made more sense for them, because he's not going to get a max contract next offseason. Sure. I don't think he's going to get close to that. He's still young too. Like he's been in the league, it feels like forever, but he's only 26. Like he's not, he's lines up very well in terms of age with Devin Booker and with Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, all those guys. Like he's much more of a 3-point shooter than Ayton. It would have been, Ayton's a better rebounder. Ayton's more physical. Turner's a better shot blocker, better 3-point shooter. Like he could have been like a more modern stretch unicorn big, whatever you want to call it. Like he could have given them a very different look.
For sure.
So yeah, I don't really get it from Phoenix's perspective. Like again, business wise, I do, but I just feel like they really stubbed their toe every single step of the way until this very final step where they're like, well, we can't lose them for nothing, but like, just negotiate the sign and trade, guys. Like I'm expecting this to end very poorly for Phoenix at some point, whether it's this year, whether it's next year. Like I do not see DeAndre Ayton playing out the remainder of this next contract in Phoenix. I think it will come to a head at some point.
Absolutely. And the big thing with this is that something that I learned today that I didn't even realize, he will now get to pick where he wants to go essentially in the next year. So if he goes back and things are shitty and everyone hates each other and Ayton's upset and he just wants to play Call of Duty Warzone all day because apparently that's what he does, then ultimately they'll have to figure out somewhere to move him. But all right, so first off, no one wants to pay centers nowadays, like you said, like except for Jokic and Embiid. Like those are the two centers who get paid. Karl Anthony Towns got paid probably a lot more than he's worth, but also Minnesota wanted to keep him. They're trying this whole double big thing out. We'll see how that works. The large majority of centers do not get paid. So Ayton's value immediately on this 4-year max is a little bit lower on the trade market than it would have been had they traded him a year or two ago. So there's that element of it, right? Then there's the element of now he gets to say, well, I don't want to go to that team. I want to go to the Pacers, or I want to go to the wherever he wants to go. He basically gets to pick the team that he goes to. So from the Suns' point of view, they're going to get back even less now. Like maybe they'll get a Miles Turner level player, but like that's probably the way that they looked at it. They were like, look, if we bring him back, worst case scenario, we can always, maybe the Pacers will hold on to Miles Turner till the trade deadline and we can get him then. And then maybe we can get a little more because he's under contract. We can get a first round pick or we can get whatever. But still, it does feel like you're really like with Chris Paul at 38 years old, with Devin Booker entering his prime now, you're really testing fate right now. Like it really feels like you're kind of pushing it in terms of you want to have a good locker room chemistry. You want to have it like it was 2 years ago, not like how it was last year. And now it just feels like I don't think it's going to be a Ben Simmons situation because I just think that was such a uniquely insane thing, but it could get really, really bad.
I was actually thinking, have we heard anything about the Ben Simmons arbitration hearing? I don't think so, right?
Who cares? It's like it was. I mean, it always felt so.
I think
like
it's
forced to me.
It's important though, right? Because like if he wins his money back, then what's stopping DeAndre Ayton from reporting to camp in October and saying, you know what, guys, I am not mentally ready to play. I will be on January 15th for another team, but until then, sorry guys, I'm just not feeling it.
I mean, it's a possibility. I would imagine. I have not heard a single thing about the Ben Simmons arbitration case. I would imagine that they either let it go or they're delaying it. I don't know what it is, but like this would be the perfect time to do it. I mean, it's the off season. Ben doesn't even play basketball anymore, so like he's got plenty of free time. Like he just does whatever. Yeah, exactly. He's chilling, so he's got a lot of time. I don't know. I mean, that is a good point though. Like, because if it does go to arbitration, Ben Simmons wins his money, then pretty much any player, KD, Ayton, anyone could do. Kyrie, they could all do what Ben did and get themselves to another situation as fast as possible, so that they can pretty much get out there and play for the only teams that they actually want to play for. So it's interesting. But speaking of the KD thing, we do need to talk about that. This majorly affects the Kevin Durant trade because Phoenix was the one team Kevin Durant wanted to go play for. And the idea behind it was they'll sign and trade Ayton somewhere. That team will send assets to the Nets. The Suns will trade Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, every pick they have to the Nets, and they will get back Kevin Durant. Well, now it becomes complicated because you basically don't have enough to get Kevin Durant. Even if you sent Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, every pick, you still need more to be able to get Kevin Durant back because he's fucking Kevin Durant. Sure. So now it's possible that this Kevin Durant thing, like I would guess he's not traded before the season, and it will probably go into the season and potentially up through January. And who knows by then, if the Nets are in first place, then maybe Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are like, or if Kyrie Irving's still on the team, they just say like, fuck it, let's stay and see how it goes. And then, Kyrie might leave after next season. I don't know. But long story short, Kevin Durant probably is not getting traded this offseason because Miami doesn't have enough. The only other team he put on his list was Phoenix, and Phoenix does not have enough now. So what the fuck is going to happen?
I appreciate this reverse jinx attempt. Like, that it's now going to happen in the next hour at this podcast.
It's apparently if I tweet it, it will happen. I'm on that streak where if I should probably just tweet it right now to see if I can get the slop to drop sometime in the next hour or two, because I literally tweeted earlier today, I'm over the Ayton stuff, and within an hour they gave him the offer sheet. And then a few weeks ago, when I had an appointment and I was like, I'm not going to be available for an hour and something massive is going to happen. And then that was the day, literally during that hour, Kevin Durant asked for his trade request. So there's a good possibility that after this podcast that Kevin Durant will get traded this offseason. But if I was a betting man, I would put money on him being back on the Nets to at least start the season next year.
Yeah, Dan Favale of Bleacher Report just published an article like an hour or two ago all about the ripple effect of the Ayton stuff on the KD situation. So I'd encourage everyone to check that out, because he reached the same conclusions. Like the Suns, their best offer either involved an Ayton sign and trade to the Nets or somewhere else, or just get some maybe you get Miles Turner back for Ayton, you send Miles Turner to the Nets, whatever. Now their best offer is weaker. So Miami was the other team reportedly on KD's list. I have no idea what Miami can package together to appeal to the Nets. It sounds like they've tried, and the Nets are like not even close. So, and also
the Bam and Ben thing is
right.
You can't have Bam. Bam is the one guy, but you'd have to do Bam plus a bunch of stuff, like Bam plus Tyler Hero plus picks plus Gabe Vincent or Max Strus or whoever they want, just to get in the conversation for Kevin Durant. And ultimately, they would just not be able to do that because Ben Simmons. It's the same reason why they can't acquire Donovan Mitchell, who would be by far the best player that they could acquire.
Which is really, it's just hilarious that Ben Simmons is thwarting all of this for them.
It's beautiful.
What a long con by Daryl. I don't know if he saw it coming, but
no, really there's no way. Although there wasn't that Athletic article that was published before the season that said it was like a front office executive that was like, James Harden is going to ask out, then Kyrie Irving's going to ask out, then Kevin Durant's going to ask out. And that's exactly what happened. So there was at least that thought around the league, but ultimately, I do think that this Ben Simmons situation, everything, honestly, the Ben Simmons situation, if they're good next year and Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are back, then you can thank Ben Simmons for that, because you weren't able to acquire the best players you could possibly acquire for Kevin Durant and made the trade virtually impossible.
Yeah, if anything, maybe this causes KD to expand his list. I know Toronto fans have been lusting over him for weeks, and I don't know if they're going to put Scotty Barnes on the table or Siakam on the table or whoever, but they can put together a compelling offer. The Pelicans can put together a compelling offer. I don't know why we're treating Brandon Ingram like he's some untouchable in a Kevin Durant trade.
He shouldn't be. I'm going to be honest. I don't think Devin Booker should be an untouchable in a Kevin Durant trade. I think that they should do that? No. But I don't think that it should be completely out of the question that you're not trading Devin Booker for Kevin Durant. That's how good I think Kevin Durant still is. I think unless you're one of the 7 best players in the NBA, there's everyone should be on the table for Kevin Durant virtually.
Yeah, and if he was under contract for 1 more year, it'd be different. But 4 more years. This is not a Kevin Durant rental. This is, you've got him for the rest of his prime or whatever this is, the next stage after his prime. But he's still putting up 37 and 6 even at the age of 33. He's still an incredible player. So I'm with you. All of these guys who are being deemed as off the table or untouchable, none of them should be off the table. Or
who's the funniest one you've heard? Because I've heard a few funny ones.
Have the Heat said Hero? I'm sure they are including Hero. Okay,
they would throw. Are you kidding me? I think they would give up Hero for. They'd probably give up Hero for a high level role player at this point. I think it's pretty obvious Tyler Hero's not going to become the next Devin Booker like they thought he was. I don't even think Tyler Hero's bad, but I don't think that's in his future.
I feel like I've heard more funny ones with Mitchell and the Knicks, which I know we'll get to shortly. But who are the ones who you've heard?
Honestly, the most of them are just by Bill Simmons, who's ridiculous.
Sure.
He said, I can't even remember who exactly he said, but he said he definitely wouldn't trade Jaylen Brown, which like there should be a conversation there for sure. I don't know why like Jaylen Brown will never be as good as Kevin Durant is right now, even though he's a very good young player. I want to say that he said he wouldn't trade Desmond Bane. I want to say that. Or maybe he said he wouldn't include JJJ and Desmond Bane or something like that.
Okay.
It might have been worse, but it might have been better. But I remember there were some pretty insane ones where I was like, I think he said Bam. If I remember correctly, he might have said Bam. But either way, everyone should be on the table for Kevin Durant, but apparently no one wants to put anything on the table. And the real reason for that is because they know that if Kevin Durant goes somewhere that he doesn't want to go, he could just be a year from now, do the same fucking thing. And then you're like, all right, why did we just trade Scotty Barnes? Why did we just trade whoever it is for Kevin Durant when he didn't want to be here in the first place? So,
yeah, but part of me thinks like all the vibes that you get from Kevin Durant is really like he is the real hooper. Like all he wants to do is go play basketball. And I would think if he goes to a team with a good foundation, like if Toronto does acquire him and he could just put all of this bullshit with Kyrie behind him. And like, I think they have the infrastructure in place and like a great management, great coaching staff. I think he would be fine there. Like that, if I'm Toronto, I am really seriously considering, even though he's not like, we're not on his list, you take that gamble. Like it worked out for them with Kawhi and that was a rental. Like this isn't a rental. This is a guy who's better than Kawhi and you've got him for 4 years. Like I love Scotty Barnes. I think he's going to be great, but I don't know, man. If it's like Scotty and OG and Gary Trent and like and Fred VanVleet, like everything, and you have to take back Joe Harris, so you've got like nothing left. That's one thing. But if it's just Scotty and like
Gary
whatever
Trent,
else, it
would be to like make the salary. Yeah,
right. Thad Young, like I don't, who gives a shit?
Well,
about
Thad Young, you can't trade. You can't trade until this comes back to Thad Young just signed. So like. You'd have to wait until December or January to trade some of these guys to even match the salary if you don't want to give up any pieces of your core. So, like, this is why it feels like a Durant trade is going to go into the season because a lot of guys that you could even match salary for, like, I was thinking the other day, I was like, oh, why don't you just I'm just thinking of like a random, like the Warriors would obviously have to trade like Wiggins or whatever, but like they don't have a ton of salary to match to go out in a trade. And a lot of teams seems like a lot of their guys who they've matched for salary were just signed. So they'd have to wait until December or January. And I just think like if I had to put money on it, I would say Kevin Durant is definitely on the Nets to start the season right now. And I would say that Kyrie Irving is more likely to be moved than Kevin Durant. I just feel like because he has 1 year left and because management seems to be like, we're fucking done with this guy. They know Kevin Durant will be a good soldier. They know Kevin Durant will come in and play regardless because he's Kevin Durant and he loves basketball and he's like, that's just kind of who he is. He's also 34. He's got his legacy on the line. Like they could come to an agreement and be like, look, if things don't work out, we'll trade you in the middle of the season. Like we'll work something out. Right. Kyrie, you never fucking know with him. Like, he could literally just be like, no, I'm not coming. Fuck it. I don't care. I don't care about the money. I got hundreds of millions of dollars. It literally doesn't matter to me. So I already punted a bunch of money last year. Like, it doesn't matter at all. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
no, I'm right with you.
Yeah. All right. So let's do a little bit of a break here. This episode is brought to you by Philly Sports Trips. Philly Sports Trips is dedicated to premium travel and tailgating experiences for passionate Philadelphia fans. They'll hook you up with a flight, 5-star hotel, and an amazing tailgate filled with great food and drinks that you will get to enjoy with other Philly sports fans. You can book Phillies and Eagles trips right now. And then you can also visit the link in the description to book a trip today. Please support You Know Ball by booking a trip with Philly Sports Trips and select the Bell in the Birdman /You Know Ball when you are booking your trip. Thank you to Philly Sports Trips for sponsoring this episode. All right, so now we are on to the Knicks with Donovan Mitchell, apparently. I don't know. I honestly have no idea. I don't know if this is like some Danny Ainge mastermind shit where like someone joked on Twitter earlier, Matt, aka Panasonic DX, who always comes on the podcast. He joked that Danny is finally finally reversing the leaks on the other teams and being like, because now if the Knicks don't trade for Donovan Mitchell after Danny leaked to Shams that they're the only team that they're basically interested in making a deal with because they have so much draft capital, then everyone will just be like, LOL Knicks, right?
That the almost trade has flipped.
Exactly.
Finally. Yeah, I hear you.
Danny's figured it out because everyone made fun of him for so many years, and now he's leaking like, you want to make fun of me? I don't really care. I'll keep Donovan Mitchell for all I need. And the Knicks are the ones that should be desperate, and they should be the ones giving up the draft capital. But everything seems to indicate that Donovan Mitchell is like pretty much going to be a Knick. Like Wendy said it. Shams has basically said it. I mean, as much as Shams can say, like he doesn't come out and flat out say that, but like it seems like there's a one team market for Donovan Mitchell right now, and it's the Knicks, and it's probably because they're willing to overpay, right?
Yeah, I think it's been pretty obvious since like February that this is where it was headed in July. Like as soon as you could see the Jazz collapsing in the playoffs, you could see when that happened, there's no way they run this thing back. Maybe you think they trade one of Gobert or Mitchell instead of both, but it's like, what's the point? Like you traded Gobert for a bunch of picks and then guys who aren't going to be part of the long-term future. So of course it makes sense to then go try to trade Mitchell to another desperate team, get even more draft capital, hopefully get some young guys in there as well. And then you get, hopefully a 14% shot at a generational prospect next year. So it makes too much sense from Utah's side not to happen. And as you said, like, I know a lot of people ragged on the Knicks for what they did on draft night, but all of a sudden those extra 3 first-round picks that they acquired.
Yeah.
Now that makes a lot more sense too. So I think they did that with this in mind. Like I'm sure they saw behind the scenes. I mean, like when Quinn Snyder stepped down, Woj had the report of like Donovan Mitchell is shocked and deeply unsettled about his future. Like, bro, Quinn Snyder was going to quit as soon as he could. Like I don't know why he dragged it out for a couple weeks, but like that was also telegraphed. Like none of this stuff has been very subtle. So yeah, I mean, I think the Knicks have the right combination of young guys, but not with like high enough upside that they are like blue chip. We can't trade these players, and then just a ton of draft capital, and they're just desperate to get a start.
Yep. So I guess the major question is, do they include RJ Barrett?
Yeah. It sounds like the Jazz don't even want him.
That's okay. So that has been my thing. I actually agree with the Jazz in this regard because we don't even know what RJ Barrett is yet. Like RJ has had such an up and down career so far. His rookie year, he really struggles. Second year, he has a bounce back and he's part of a winning team. They go to the playoffs. He's like the second or third best player on that team. He's showing a lot of development and growth. And obviously development isn't always linear, but a lot of that might have been the fact that he was like, had some pretty hot shooting that season, and he shot 40% from three, and like he's like a career average like 34% 3-point shooter. He's not a great free throw shooter. He can create a little bit, but you don't want him to be your primary guy. He's kind of got to settle into a tertiary role, I feel like, where he's off the ball more. He's got to focus more on creating off of secondary actions, attacking closeouts, all the things that we always talk about with tertiary creators. And he basically, like, his swing piece is going to be the catch and shoot because he's terrible on pull-ups. He's pretty good on catch and shoots. He shoots like 37%. If he could basically just cut out pull-ups from his diet, I actually think he can be an above average to good 3-point shooter. And if that's the case, then you're like, okay, he's a decent passer. He's got the shooting. We know he's a pretty good defender, even though, like, weirdly enough, he like doesn't generate turnovers for someone who's considered like a really good defender. But like, I can see the vision there. But the problem is, if you're the Jazz, you don't have that guy that he can play off of, and you're just going to get the same version of RJ Barrett that we saw early in his career with the Knicks. And now you have to pay that guy immediately. So why would you even want RJ Barrett when you could just be like, just give me 2 or 3 extra first round picks for more flexibility, give me one of your other young guys that's on his rookie deal. So we're in Utah. We don't keep guys. Even if RJ Barrett comes here and he progresses and he gets better and he becomes like a sub all-star or an all-star, like the highest end outcome for him, which I don't even think is realistic, then he's going to leave right when he's done his max contract in 4 or 5 years. Or even before that, do what Donovan Mitchell did and be like, I don't even want to be here. So, so if you're Utah, getting guys on their first year, Quentin Grimes, Obi Toppin, Emmanuel Quickly, who have an extra year to give you that flexibility and give you time to develop their game and also not have to overpay them, makes a lot more sense to me. If like the difference between getting RJ Barrett is like 2 future first round picks or 3 future first round picks, I'd rather just take the picks and the younger players.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my podcast co-host, Morton Jensen, and I were talking the other day, like after the Brunson signing, we're like, who's the best player on the Knicks right now? And what does that player profile as on a championship team? And it's like, it's between Brunson and, but yeah, like probably Brunson right now. Barrett has the most upside, but like even on a championship team, I don't think Barrett's more than a number 3 option. And so, you know, if you trade for Barrett, you don't have to extend him this offseason. You could let him become a restricted free agent next summer. Maybe you want that full year of intel to figure out, okay, like, is this guy worth the full max, or should we do what, Phoenix just did with DeAndre Ayton and like dare him to get a max from somewhere else?
Sure.
The thing they could be banking on too is that, when the new TV deals come in 2025, the salary cap is probably going to explode. So, the first 2 years of Barrett's new contract will be under the old cap. And then 2025, like maybe he's earning even less than 25% of the new cap. So that would be one potential reason to go for him. But I'm with you. Like, I'd absolutely just prefer later first round picks, especially if they're from the Knicks. Like, I will happily bet on their incompetence winning out over time. Like, if you can get unprotected 2027, 2029 first, like, frankly, I would, depending on how many picks they get in this entire package, those are the ones I would want unprotected. Like, I don't get, sure, lottery protected 2023 pick. I don't care. Like, sure. I want the 2029 unprotected because I think that's when things are going to have gone south for you.
That's the pick that they've apparently been interested in. I did hear that like the 2029 pick was what they were very interested in, which is so funny to me that Danny Ainge is like, I want this pick 7 years from now.
Yeah.
You even still going to be the GM? Yeah, exactly. It's the Zach Lowe thing. It's like, wait, what? Like, Danny Ainge, how old are you? Like, are you still going to be alive? Like, I'm not sure. But also, like, I think the Knicks should absolutely do this, whatever it costs. Yeah. I'm basically like, I understand some people that are worried. They're like, oh no, it's the Melo trade again, where the other team's going to have us over a barrel and we're going to have to pay all this money and we're going to have to do, pay all these picks and we're going to have to overpay for a guy and blah, blah, blah. But like, you haven't had a star since Melo. Mitchell is right now at worst a top 30 player. I would argue a top 20 player. I would say that he's 26. I think he's still going to get better. Like, I mean, he's really predicated his game. He's a very athletic player, right? But he's kind of predicated his game on the pull-up shooting. He's predicated his game on becoming a better playmaker and passer, becoming a better driver. Like, I do think that there are things in his game that are going to age pretty well into his late 20s and 30s. Now, with a small guard, you always worry that the injuries could catch up to him and whatever. But at the same time, like, Donovan Mitchell is, I would say, and this is someone that I think he listens to the podcast. He's on Twitter. He has said to me many times, like, that basically Donovan Mitchell in theory could become like the next Damian Lillard, where like he honestly, like, Mitchell's only been playing basketball for 10 years. Like, he was playing before that, but he wasn't like mainly focused on basketball. He was a baseball guy until he was 16 years old. And the fact that he has gone in 10 years from being like a casual basketball player to one of the 20, 30 best players in the world shows me that, like, I think he can still continue to grow and get better, because the last 2 years he's taken another leap. And I do wonder how much of that was context. with the Jazz because the Jazz had that great system with Quinn Snyder. They had a fantastic, you're going to have another role man in Mitchell Robinson, but he's not as good as Gobert in that regard. Mm-hmm. He's obviously not as good as Gobert on defense, which covered up for a lot of Mitchell's weaknesses. And then on offense, you basically had 4 insane shooters around Mitchell at all times. And Bojan, it was Bojan, Conley, I believe Clarkson, and who else am I forgetting here? There's one other guy, maybe Joe Ingles or something, that was like basically over 40% on catch and shoots in the past few years. And like, if you have that kind of spacing around you, you're going to be able to flourish a lot easily, especially in a ball movement system, all that shit. Mm-hmm. So my whole thing is here. I still think the Knicks should do it just to kind of get some relevance, to get stars maybe wanting to go to New York. And Donovan Mitchell has a lot of friends around the NBA. So like, honestly, the only weird part about this to me is like, what the hell do they do with Julius Randle? Because like now you have Mitchell, Brunson, Barrett as your top 3 guys, which is like a pretty good top 3 considering where the Knicks have been forever.
Yeah.
But like Randall is the one, and Mitchell Robinson's a totally fine starting center. They might be able to keep some of the younger guys that can come off the bench. But I just am like, what the hell do you do with Julius Randle in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, he cashed it at the exact right time, didn't he?
Yep.
I think there are a couple concerns from the Knicks' perspective. It all depends on how much they have to give up, right? Sure. Like Ian Begley of SNY just reported that the Knicks, I guess, spoke with the Jazz before they finalized their free agent signings, and they talked about a package that would have included Mitchell Robinson and at least 3 first-round picks. But the Knicks thought that was too much.
Which is like, what?
I mean,
there's
don't know
no way that's true, right?
Right.
Like, yeah.
I would hope not. I mean, we don't know what else was in that package, so maybe it was like at least 3, could be like 6, and it could be like all of the young guys other than Barrett. But
also, quick question: wouldn't Mitchell Robinson have to agree to that? It's a sign-in trade.
They would have been a sign,
yeah. So I guess they maybe would have just paid him a ton of money to make it work or something, so that he would be like, "Sure, I'll go live in Utah."
Right, and play on this garbage team. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I'm worried about the defense of a Donovan Mitchell and Jalen Brunson backcourt, because you mentioned Donnie's small. Jalen is also 6'1", 190. Like that does not profile. We've seen a Donnie-led team with crappy perimeter defenders get destroyed in the playoffs despite having Rudy Gobert. With all due respect to Mitchell Robinson, he is not Rudy Gobert. So I feel like that could be even worse for the Knicks. Like it almost feels like this is the quintessential Knicks move of like, we're going to go get this big name, flashy star, and like we're going to improve to be like a fringe. Maybe we'll be a top 6 seed, but like probably still a play-in team.
Probably still like a 7 to 10 seed, yeah.
Yeah, we're probably still going to get knocked out in the first round, but at least we got somebody who can put butts in seats. Like,
but also like that's the weird thing about the Knicks is that they just crave that relevancy. I feel like because having lived in New York, like people go to the games no matter what. The Knicks suck and they sell out the games. But like in terms of they want to like dominate, like they already kind of dominate the headlines, but they want to dominate headlines for good reasons. And the Melo comp is the simplest one because they're kind of similar level players for where they're at in their career. They're also kind of flashy bucket getter type guys, although I think that Mitchell is probably a more well-rounded offensive player. Melo was very, very good, but he was mostly like a top-notch scorer. And I just think that, like, I don't know. Like, if you are the Knicks, like, what's the alternative? You're not going to be bad enough to tank now. Like, you've already kind of determined you want to be relevant and, like, you want to be, whether it's a play-in team or just below the play-in, like, you're going to keep getting those picks in the 11 to 14 range. And, like, either way, you're going to be in purgatory because of the decisions that you've made. So at least if you're in purgatory and you have Mitchell, like the theoretical upside of that is that he could get one more guy to decide to go to New York, whether it's a free agent or whether it's one of his friends that wants to get traded there or whatever it is. And then you're like, might be a legit contender from that point on. And like, you've got 3 or 4 years to try to make this thing work with Donovan Mitchell. You hope he gets better. And like, I brought up the Dame Donovan Mitchell comps earlier. Reed Wallach, who's been on the podcast before, said to me, this is literally just Dame and CJ 2.0 with Mitchell and Brunson. But I said, I was like, the Trailblazers got to the conference finals. Like, if the Knicks ever got to the conference finals, that would be the most success they've had since the finals in the year 2000. I think they would absolutely take that. Like, I don't think that this is like some horrible move if they do it. Like, I think it's a good move from the Knicks perspective because it once again makes New York relevant. And then, like, maybe it puts you in that range and whatever. But, like, look, if shit doesn't work out, maybe 2 years from now, maybe 3 years from now, if Mitchell wants out, you can still get a haul back for him. He's still Donovan Mitchell. And I still think he's going to be really good. And, like, and this is something we've been talking about in the streams, like, Rudy Gobert going for 4 first-round picks or basically 5 or 6 first-round picks, if you count their recent first-round draft picks, just shows me that, like, they're not as valuable as they used to be. Like all these picks, like the Knicks have 8 or 9 picks they can trade now, but like all of those picks are not going to be great picks. Like some of them are heavily protected. Some of them are like the Knicks are going to be pretty decent. So they'll probably be mid to late first round. And like, at that point, I'm like, I'm not letting that separate me from getting one of the 20 best players in basketball when I haven't had one in like a fucking decade.
Yeah, and especially like if they're not giving up Barrett, like their other young guys are interesting, but I don't know that any of them are like gonna develop into stars. I would frankly bet against it at this point. And even if they stay in New York, they're definitely not going to develop into stars because Tibbs isn't going to play them. So like I'm with you. Like I would, depending on the asking price, if it's like all 8 firsts and every other young guy other than Barrett.
I think it's going to be like, it's going to be like Toppin, Quickly, Grimes. That's like your starting point. I know Knicks fans don't want to hear this, but like, look, I know that you love them to death and they're your like prospects, but like they're role players. Like they're going to be fine players. You can't let that determine whether you trade for Donovan Mitchell or not. I think it's going to be those 3. And then it's going to be like 5 first-round picks, maybe 6. Like, I think it's going to be like a lot of first-round picks, and they're going to try to get as many in the far future as they can because they want to bank on the Knicks being pretty bad in a few years if this goes under. So, I mean, like, I don't know. To me, like, with as many first-round picks as they have, if they can still hold on to 3 of the picks that they have or 2 of the picks that they have, like, those players are nothing to me if I'm looking for a star, and those picks are nothing to me if I'm looking for a legit star. I would do the deal. I understand there's probably a lot of negotiating now. Big brain theory that someone came up with earlier. Is it possible that this was leaked, not because Danny Ainge wants to make them look like fools for not doing the deal, but is it possible that the Jazz and the Nets have talked about Kevin Durant going somewhere else, Mitchell going to the Nets, and maybe Ben Simmons moving to Utah or wherever? Who gives a shit?
Right.
And they're using the Knicks as leverage because the Nets would be like, well, we don't want him to go to the Knicks because that's like our crosstown rival, like whatever. I highly doubt it, but there's at least a sliver of me that's like, it's possible that like, when does this ever happen? When a team just comes out and says, there's one team.
I don't know if they're doing that. I think they're just saying like the Knicks have engaged and they've got the right combination of things that we're after. So like, you know, like Miami, I'm sure has placed a call, and I'm sure Utah's like, no, Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson don't do it for us. Sorry, like give us, and like I think they already owe their 2025 first, so like they're limited in what they can send out. Like I think the Knicks having their own picks plus the ones that they just acquired, like I can't imagine the Jazz are going to want to get fewer picks for Donovan Mitchell than they did for Gobert, right? So I think like 5 firsts is probably the starting point for these negotiations. And then again, like the Knicks have a bunch of fringy, interesting young guys who aren't going to turn into anything like superstars. So they shouldn't have any qualms about giving them up. But Toppin was a top 10 pick, quickly looked like a potential interesting thing as a rookie. They just seem like they could meet each other's needs better than any other team. So I think they're like, why are we going to mess around? And Utah's like, sure, we'll take calls from other sides, but you guys have what we want. We know you want Mitchell. Let's not fuck around here. Let's just agree to a deal and not waste each other's time.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I think that is a fair argument back. They look around the league and they say, no one else has what we want, or they're at least not willing to give what we want, and you have what we want. So why are we going to waste our time talking to these other teams, and we're just going to try to pillage you for everything that we could possibly get? And by the way, almost every time that these teams make a trade for stars, and maybe this will not be the case soon because just fucking the value of stars has gone up so much that they get traded for so fucking much, but it still does feel like the large majority of times that teams that get the best player do end up winning the trade in the long run. So once again, I just think I would do it. I think the upside, I do think that there is, especially if they can move Julius Randle and just get something whatever. It's going to be hard to move him, but his contract isn't it's not Tobias Harris bad. He doesn't make $40 million. He makes $25 million for the next few years. If they could get anything for Julius Randle, then I'm like, all right, you at least have if RJ gets much better and Mitchell gets much better and Brunson stays on his same track, I'm like, that's a pretty good top three and a competitive team in the East. And I could see that team maybe not reaching a conference finals because it's just way too tough, but winning around and being the relevant Knicks team that they've wanted for so long. I could see that possibly in their future, but
maybe Mitchell, having Mitchell and Brunson takes pressure off of Randall, so he isn't in this number one hero ball scorer role, and he can, he's in more of a complementary role that better fits him anyway.
He doesn't do that though. That's the thing is
right.
That's the problem. Everyone complains about Tobias, but Randall is not Tobias in the locker room. Randall will show when he's pissed. He's not gonna be happy about getting less touches. He's not gonna be happy about having to become a spot up guy, especially because he has the worst shot selection of any player in the NBA. So that's the difference between Randall and Tobias to me. At one point in the offseason, I was down so bad. This is before every trade. This is beginning of slop season when I was just demented in my thoughts.
Sure. And
I was well, maybe we could just trade Tobias to the Knicks for Randall and maybe we could get a pick because Tobias has less time. And I was just what the fuck am I Randall is a bad locker room guy when he's not getting when things aren't going his way. He has worse shot selection than Tobias Harris. He doesn't want to be a spot up guy. He doesn't try on defense like Tobias just did. There was no way. I talked myself out of that one really quickly. Even Mike Chiodo, who has been get rid of Tobias for anything, has said the two players he would never trade Tobias for are Julius Randle and Russell Westbrook. So I can stand by that. I understand that. But all right. So this speaking of Tobias, this is a very important question.
Yes.
The Sixers were never in the conversation for Donovan Mitchell. I don't know if it's because they never were willing to put Tyrese Maxey on the table, or if because the Jazz were really just why do we care about getting Maxey, who, he's a year away from getting extended, and we want to try to get super young guys. And we know he has a lot of upside, but we don't want to win too many games. And maybe if he becomes too good, then we win too many games. We want to tank, all that shit.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like Daryl Morey to me to just not have made a phone call about we didn't hear anything. He didn't even try to call or call and be look, if we can move Maxey to another team, would you be interested in taking Tobias and Maxey, or would you be interested in taking Tobias's salary to make it work? And then another team sends you 4 first-round picks or whatever. And then we send Thibault somewhere else and then they send a first-round pick. It is weird to me that we were never in the conversation. Is it not weird to you?
I mean, it's weird to me that we still don't know James Harden's contract. That's
that's another thing.
That's what's weird to me, and that's what makes me think there could be another move coming down. Because I've written about it plenty, but once Harden locks in, they're going to be very close to the apron. We don't know exactly how close, but probably somewhere within like $4 million. So if they are trying to make another move and they aren't sure exactly how much salary they're going to extra salary they're taking back, maybe that's why they haven't locked Harden in yet officially. They're going to make that move, and then they're going to be like, all right, take literally every penny left, or they'll have a little bit of flexibility for in-season moves if they need to. But with Maxey and Harris, I was asked this question before. I like value-wise, I get it, right? Like, you're clearly getting the best player. As much as I love Maxey, it makes sense from just in terms of pure value. In terms of fit, I'm not as sold. Like, I as much as people shit on Tobias, I think Tobias is going to play a very important role for this team this year. And I think there are very few teams where it makes sense to have Tobias on that contract. But because Maxey is earning so much less, and because Harden this year especially is going to earn a lot less than he could, that Tobias contract, like, it didn't prevent them from doing anything this offseason. Also, Joel, and I mean, like, look at Melton's on a value deal. Joel Embiid is going into the last year of his max. He's a $50 million player making $30 million. Like, the Tobias thing sucks because you don't want to pay your fourth best player the most money. But ultimately, like you said, like, other than like maybe trading for Eric Gordon, like, what is it really limiting you? Like a move like that would help the team for sure. I'm not saying it wouldn't, but like, it's not preventing you from getting the BAE and the MLE and trading for Melton and doing all the things that you wanted to do this offseason. So I get that. I mean, look, I want to start by saying what I said on Twitter the other day. I do not want to trade Tyrese Maxey. I love Tyrese Maxey. He's my favorite player to watch in the league. I don't want to not watch him play basketball. And like, I've talked about this before, I would do anything to win a championship. But if we didn't win a championship and Tyrese Maxey was a Sixer for his whole career, I would feel fine. And same with Joel Embiid. Like, I would feel fine about that because I just like watching them play. And I think that they're great in the community and they love it here. Like, that's a big thing to me, especially when you're like, they're your legit star players. So there's that element of it to me. But I do want to say, like, this idea that Maxey is like going to be better than Donovan Mitchell, like look, like, Donovan Mitchell's already at worst a top 30 player in the NBA. If Maxey continues to get better, I think he has the potential to be that kind of player as a secondary guy, as a guy who is not running an offense necessarily, but as a guy who we saw flourish off the ball last year with movement, attacking closeouts, shooting off the catch, doing everything that he did so amazingly for the team last year. And working off James Harden and Joel Embiid in a way that, like, I said it on a podcast the other day, he's like weirdly scalable offensively for a small guard. Like, it's very rare that you get a offensive guard who can eat possessions on ball that's 6'2", and he can eat possessions on ball and be in a very efficient scorer that way and do it off the ball. It's almost like kind of like a young Bradley Beal in a way. And it's the fact that Maxey went so late in the draft and we all loved him pre-draft and all that shit. Like, I don't want to trade him, but this idea that like he's definitely going to be better than Donovan Mitchell, who, like, in my opinion is underrated. If anything, I think offensively he's become one of the top, I don't know, 10, 15 primary creators in the NBA. And like, that is something that is incredibly hard to get. Even with James Harden, like, we don't know what James Harden's going to be. So, like, if they did make this move, it would be such a Gerald move, which they're not going to do. But, like, if they did make this Tobias and Maxey move, I would get it from – it does raise your championship ceiling, in my opinion, for next year at least. While Harden and Embiid, Harden's close enough to, like, where he was, even though he's not the same player. And then Embiid is squarely in the middle of his prime, and Mitchell lines up perfectly with that as he enters his prime. Like, I would understand it. I'm glad that they're not doing it just because I love Maxey. But, like, I think it is a little bit ridiculous that, like, Sixers fans are tweeting at me like Mitchell sucks. Like, are you still caught up over the Ben Simmons thing or something? Definitely. Like,
Mitchell's very good. Like, wait, I'm I feel like people are they're very much underrating Donovan Mitchell in this whole situation has been my thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. For me, it's really just a matter of like, one, if you're making that move, I would hope you're getting some forward some other way this offseason, because like then your plan is PJ Tucker at the 4. I guess Paul Reed is your backup 4, but isn't he also going to be your backup 5?
Center.
Like,
yeah, that's the hard part. Right.
So like you're all of a sudden.
I joked and I said Melton stretch 4.
right. Exactly. Like you're all of a sudden you're starting to get thin in the front court behind Embiid, which has just always been the problem for them.
If you could squeeze Bojan Bogdanovic, if you could make the salary work, and you could squeeze Bojan Bogdanovic out, that would be the one scenario where I could be like, all right, I get it. Like, you got a volume shooter that can sometimes play defense. Daniel House screams at him in the playoffs, apparently, when he doesn't play defense. I don't know if you saw that video, but everyone thinks that Daniel House is a psycho in Utah, which is a great sign. We need more psychos. But Bojan, like, if you got Bojan back, because they're like, he's an expiring, we don't give a shit. Like, take Bojan. We'll take everything you have that you can send us. That's the only scenario in which I could see it maybe happening, but obviously it's not going to.
Right. And then you'd have to send out like Furkan, who cares, Matisse as salary filler and like to stay under the apron. So I mean, you have to consider it, but I also think like with Embiid and Harden in particular, like those guys are going to gobble up a grand majority of the offensive possessions. So the point about Maxey's scalability, both up and down, like he isn't going into this season as this well-established star, and he like knows his role in the pecking order, and Tobias knows his role in the pecking order, which I think is going to be really valuable. Like Donovan has been this ball dominant star pretty much since he got into the league. So like, how you balance that with Embiid and Harden. Well, I'm not saying it's impossible, because we just saw it work very well with the Nets before Kyrie went off to his COVID crusade. But before that, like, it was working fine. So like you can have 3 ball dominant stars together, but I think he would not be the guy I'm cashing the Maxey chip on.
Sure, that's fair. I think that's fair. Look, I mean, I would absolutely trade Maxey for Kevin Durant. I would consider it for Mitchell, just from an objective standpoint. Like, that's just from an objective standpoint. From a subjective standpoint, I don't want Tyrese Maxey to ever play for another NBA team. So, hopefully he's a Sixer for the rest of his career, and he can become an all-star here. Like, we all hope that he can be. And I believe in him. Like, I really do. Maybe it will be my downfall, but Maxey better sadly. That's the that's the slogan over here. So you actually wrote an article for Liberty Ballers that was basically about how the Sixers can take advantage of the Mitchell trade without trading for Mitchell. So why don't you talk a little bit about some of the other players? We just talked about Bojan Bogdanovic for a little bit. We could talk a little bit more about him. Why don't you talk about the other players that the Sixers could potentially target on the Jazz if they do decide to blow it up moving over the next few weeks?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like I've been following you, and it seems like you are also on Team Pat Bev with me. So that's the one that, like, he played with Harden in Houston. He played under Morey. He played for Doc with the Clippers for multiple years. Like,
and he still likes Doc and Harden. How rare is that a guy played with Harden and played for Doc and likes both of them? I'm like, he might be the only player in the NBA where that is the case.
I think he is one of one. And like, if we're assembling Rockets East over here, like the Gordon stuff is going to be difficult unless you send out Tobias's contract just for salary matching. But like, Beverly's at 13 million flat. Like, that's not difficult to get there. It's Matisse, it's Furkan, and is literally pick whichever small salary you want. Any of them work. And probably Milton, just
Yang, whatever. Like, yeah.
You don't even you don't have to go to Yang. Like, it could be Joe, it could be Bassie, it could be. I think it would be Milton, just because like he's going in the last year of his deal, and if you're getting Beverly back, like you now have Maxey, Harden, Beverly, and Melton. Like, Shake would just be pushed out of the rotation at that point. But
sure.
So that's the one. I mean, like, we're still hunting for dogs, right? Like, we got PJ Tucker, but Beverly would also be in that dog mold, in that like just feisty, annoying, like get in your face, piss you off defender. Like I feel like if nothing else, pairing him and Tucker, like we could just fully embrace being the role of the NBA heels, because you got Harden and Embiid just grifting for free throws, and you've got Tucker and Beverly just like doing their annoying shit all the time. Like
Maxey would be the only likable player on the team.
yeah, honestly, yes. Thibault was until roughly April.
Oof. What happened?
I don't know. I don't remember. So I think that one makes the most sense. Jordan Clarkson is not much.
Before you get into Jordan Clarkson, I just want to say about Pat Bev.
Yes,
real quick.
Please.
Pat Bev. So Pat Bev makes $13 million, like you said.
Yeah.
This is such a perfect trade for me because we get rid of Furkan Korkmaz and Matisse Thybulle. I never have to watch them play basketball again because I used to like both of them, and I just gave up on them when I realized they couldn't play in the playoffs, unfortunately.
Sure.
And you get a guy who can play in the playoffs. I know that, like, we're going to be guard heavy for sure because, like, technically Pat Bev and Melton off the bench, like, that's like you have 4 guards that are in your rotation with Maxey and Harden, and like who knows, like if Isaiah Joe's even on the team next year, like is he never going to get a shot to crack the rotation? I'm not really worried about that, but like my whole point here is once again likes Harden, likes Doc somehow amazingly, likes Morey too, I think, which is like crazy. Like no one likes those 3, and if that is the case. And you're getting these former Rockets, you're continuing the bit. Like Pat Bev fits Philadelphia so well from an ethos standpoint. Like you said, he's a dog. I've wanted him on the Sixers for years just because like ever since we lost Jimmy Butler, we really haven't had anyone who is kind of in that mold of like guy you hate when he's on the other team, but love when he's on your team.
Right.
And Pat Bev obviously is not nearly as good, but like my whole thing with him is like he would bring you extra ball handling. Like he's a little bit underrated as an offensive player. He's a pretty decent passer. He can shoot. Like he's not a high level creator, but he can do a little bit with the ball. Mm-hmm. Then on top of that, you have the fact that defensively he's going to be another great point of attack defender, which this offseason has been all about defenders who can rebound, who can shoot. And that is what he is going to bring to the team. And I know he's undersized. I know we'd be very undersized, just generally speaking. He's 6'1", but once again, and this is something that this is a term, G wings, like guard/wings, is a term that was coined by Death by Celtics on Twitter. And his whole thing has basically been that like wings are impossible to acquire. Like you can't get a wing. Like you can't go just get like a Harrison Barnes or an OG Anunoby or whoever. They don't become available. Even like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope goes for a lot in a trade. Like it's not like you got to give up a lot to get a wing, basically. And what teams have figured out over the last few years is like, well, why don't we just get guard size guys who can play and guard threes and like guard up? And Pat Bev guards up. He's always guarded 1 through 3. Melton guards 1 through 3. House can guard 2 and 3, maybe sometimes 4, but usually 2 and 3. Tobias and Tucker can guard 4s. Like I do, and even Harden can guard up to 4. Like I mean, he's defensively, he's basically a 4. Like he is a guard, but like he's basically a 4 defensively. So like my whole thing on this is like, other than Maxey, you're gonna have guys who can defend 2-3 positions, and you can get the like Pat Bev can be like not the Gary Payton type. He can be the Bruce Brown, the like the Lou Dort, like the guys that are guards that can play some wing, and like Melton and Pat Bev both fit that mold, and I think they all can play together, and it would just make the Sixers their 1 through 9 if they were able to pull off a trade like that would be like legit. Like it would be I'd feel very like I think Daniel House is probably the 9th best player in your rotation, and that makes me feel really good.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm right with you. Like I'm surprised. I mean, I got some pushback for floating Beverly. I was like, have you guys watched him? And then someone was like, well, he's a terrible shooter. And I'm like, he shot literally 40% from 3 for like 6 seasons. He had a down shooting season last year, but other than that, he's been fantastic. Like,
yeah,
I'm with you. I think he's a great fit on both ends of the floor. He is the guy I would go after. Even like remove the Doc, Morey, Harden stuff. Like if we're just looking at archetypes on Utah that I would like within a reasonable price range, he's the guy I target. Clarkson is a little more expensive at 13.3. You could still pull off basically the same trade that you could use for Beverly. But like,
I just don't.
Yeah, I mean, Jazz fans.
Clarkson's a good player, but like we just do not need a Clarkson.
No, right. Like a high volume, low efficiency chucker coming off the bench who's going to be a turnstile on defense. Like, was, when his shot's on, he's great. And he's
amazing. He scored 40 points on us a few years ago. I was like, oh, Jordan Clarkson's literally prime Allen Iverson right now. Cool.
Right. But then he also has these like 4 of 17 games where he's just completely useless on both ends of the floor. So that's not the one I would go after. Bogdanovic, you brought up earlier, it's just tough to match salary with him unless you're including Tobias. Like, it has to be literally Korkmaz, Matisse, Niang, and then 2 of Springer, Shake, Joe, Reed, or Bassie. So
so that's not going to work, especially because with Bojan, if the Harden number comes in what we think it is, it's going to be very hard to make that work under the apron. Like, even if you can salary match, it's going to get tough. Right. Like, there's not a ton of flexibility there because he makes around the same amount of money as Eric Gordon, and we know that we can't trade for Eric Gordon. So I pitched something to you pre-podcast, and what if the Sixers, because like, the one thing about Bojan, I keep saying is like, I think Bojan's a good player. Like, I think he's like, he can create a little bit. Like, he's, like when he's locked in defensively, he does have some physical limitations. He's not as good of a defender as he used to be, but like when he's locked in on that end, he's a pretty good defender. Like, he can do some things. He's going to blow some rotations sometimes, like whatever. But like, all things considered, for a guy that shoots at the volume that he does and makes the threes at the volumes that he does, that would be a very good fit offensively with what the Sixers need. He would basically be like a souped up version of what we got from Tobias down the stretch last year on offense for the Sixers next year in that tertiary role. Mm-hmm. Defensively, you might have some more concerns because Tobias actually got much better defensively. But if the Jazz were like, we want like a swap, or we want whatever, I don't even know what it is, but or a third team, maybe it's the Spurs or the Pacers who now have cap space because of the Ayton thing. Like, we'll just take Tobias Harris. You get Mike Conley to be your 6th man, and you get Bojan Bogdanovic to be your starting 4 with PJ Tucker at the 3. What do you think about that? Like, do you think, I don't think it's realistic. I don't even think the Sixers want to move Tobias anymore. But I do think if they had to make a move for some of their role players, it would be something like that.
Yeah, like, I'd be open to it depending on what the extra stuff is that Utah wants. But like, the Sixers don't have draft picks to even offer at this point, right? Like 23, 25, 27 is gone. You can offer 29 with like the protection basically has to be, the wording on it has to be the 2027 pick has to convey to Brooklyn. If it doesn't, it turns into a 2029 second because you can't trade out more than 7 years. And if the 2027 pick doesn't convey until 2028, you can't be left without 2 picks in consecutive years. So like when people are floating draft pick ideas with the Sixers, just stop. You can't do it unless they trade someone else for a pick first.
Like Thibault to another team that sends a protected first to the Jazz or whatever.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, if it's Tobias and Thibault for Conley and Bogdanovic, sure, I'm open to it. But like, I think I would rather just go for Beverly and keep Tobias because again, like,
that makes you a little bit deeper too. Like, I mean, although if Mike Conley bought into a six man role, he'd be pretty fucking good as a third guard if you could move Melton down a little bit. In theory, it probably works better than it does in reality.
Right. I mean, I was encouraged, frankly, by Tobias in the playoffs. And if you're now not making him take the top defensive assignment because you have PJ Tucker for that role, like, I know Rich Hoffman got the quotes from him at the end of last year where he's like, now that Harden's here, now that Maxey's emerged and Embiid, like, I can focus more on defense. And now if he's scaling down to take like the second toughest matchup, again, like I get he's not going to live up to the contract, but we can divorce it from him this year because it doesn't matter.
Also, the thing I've been talking about is like a year from now, having that massive expiring is going to be really valuable if you want to break it up into 2 role players, or if you want to break it up. And honestly, if a star that they really think is worth trading Maxey for comes available, like that, and that's kind of like, and I've been saying, I think that's like Daryl Morey's like Hail Mary attempt. If this year doesn't work with this roster, and he's just like, fuck it, I need a third star. It's time to go back to the old me, the Bugs Bunny meme. like he's just like, I need to find whoever it is. Right. I'm not going to say the name. I said it on a stream and everyone yelled at me. So, but he plays in South Beach and he's good friends with Joel Embiid and PJ Tucker. Sure. But all I'm saying is the Heat don't have any options. All I'm saying is that, like, if they've reached their ceiling, they ain't got nowhere to go unless Hero becomes an all-star, and I don't see that happening. Or Bam becomes even better.
And Pat Riley is done fat shaming Kyle Lowry. He's just having too much of it.
What the fuck? Kyle Lowry was good because he was fat. I know. Like we need to encourage him to stay thick, Pat Riley, fat shaming bastard. But yeah. So okay. Last thing, bro, just before we talk about Summer League real quick. Yep. Malik Beasley, 5 seconds. Yep. Yes or no?
I didn't even run the numbers on him because
he makes like 13 million. He makes like the same. Hold on.
He's 50. He's 15.6. So he would be.
His contract goes up. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So I mean, he would be.
Yeah. Damn.
Like, I think you could still do it. Let's see. They'd have to send out 12.3. So it would either be.
He's a team option too for next year.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm intrigued by him.
In general,
I would still do Beverly over. Beverly is like number one on my Jazz list, and then I do Beasley over Clarkson, but make it 12.3.
I'm just like, my whole thing is like, it probably takes too much to get Beasley, and then like the thing that they've done this offseason is everyone they've acquired can play multiple positions.
Right.
PJ can play the 3 and the 4, some 5. Melton can play the 1 and the 2, sometimes the 3. House can play the 2 and the 3. Like, they're not acquiring guys who are just like shooting guards. Like, they're that's what Malik Beasley is. He can play the 2. That's it. I don't even know how many minutes we're going to have at the 2 for him. Like, he thinks he's a star. Like, I think that I'm good on Malik Beasley, even though he was intriguing to me before for the Sixers, but like, at this point, like with the way that they built the team, I like that. Although it would be nice just to have one high volume 3-point shooter. I will say that much. One real chucker that will just like be in the rotation. But
maybe they do. They just haven't played him, and they're probably
Let's talk about that because I haven't even really talked. I did it. If you're listening on the audio podcast right now, go watch the stream on YouTube. I talked all about Summer League during a Summer League stream we did, but I haven't talked about it on the podcast because. Honestly, without Maxey, it's just not nearly as fun as it used to be. Like that year was so much fun. And I love Summer League for like getting to see the prospects and stuff, but like the Sixers didn't even have a first round pick this year. Right. Like they didn't draft anyone. So like I'm trying to get excited over like Michael Foster and like it's just a stretch. It's not going to happen for me. But the two guys that are interesting to me. Obviously, Paul Reed was way too good for Summer League. We can just get that out of the way. He's an NBA player. He's probably the best player that was at Utah Summer League. It was like him, Zaire Williams, Xavier Tillman. Paul Reed was way too good to be there. Yeah. For the other guys that are kind of still fighting for their positioning on the team, Isaiah Joe is like, I have such a hard time with him because he has not gotten the opportunity to prove himself in the NBA, but every time he has, he can't seem to hit shots to be able to justify him staying on the court because that's the only thing he really does in an offense like the Sixers. Like that's going to be his thing, is being a movement shooter, which he showed a little bit of in Vegas and in Utah. It's going to be, coming off screens, maybe doing some dribble handoff with Joel, like that's what they're going to need from him. And like, he can't score inside the arc. He's a decent passer, but what does that really matter when you're not having a ton of on-ball reps? Mm-hmm. So if he's not a 38 to 42% high volume 3-point shooter who's hitting these difficult shots, which he does every year in Summer League and preseason, then what does he really have on the Sixers roster? And his deal is non-guaranteed for this year. But at the same time, he is the one archetype of player that I feel like we're missing from this rotation. Because other than Maxey, I don't think there's anyone on this team that even has remote potential. Like, we have plenty of spot-up guys. We have Niang, Tucker, Tobias, like plenty of guys who can just catch and shoot. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you want Tobias to do it even more than he actually does. But from like a movement shooting standpoint or having any dynamic, tough shot makers from three, Isaiah Joe and Maxey are the only ones on the team that even have potential to do that off the ball. And it feels insane to me that we're looking at the possibility of cutting Isaiah Joe because he has a non-guaranteed contract when he hasn't even gotten the opportunity. And every time he does, and I know it's summer league, but every time he does, like, he shows things that would be valuable to the team.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think this is another reason why like a 3-for-1 for Beverly would actually make a lot of sense. Cause right now they've got 16 guys under contract, and that's not including like, Muhammad and Foster, who they signed to Exhibit 10. So they're going to waive those guys. They'll go to the G League. It's 16 guys. That does include Trevelin Queen, who's got the $300,000 guarantee. And when they gave that was like, you're going to be like, they signed Tucker right away, House right away, hard cap themselves within like the first minute of free agency. So like already you're like, all right, can't go above 157 million or slightly less than that. Then they give the $300,000 guarantee, and it's like, well, given the hard cap concerns, like you aren't gonna just like give that money away, because even if you waive him, that's still counting against your cap sheet. So like that to me implies that they're serious about at least giving him a real crack at the 15-man roster in training camp. So for that reason, like when I saw them sign him, I'm like, oh, Isaiah Joe have a really good summer league, and to his credit, he has. But
he shot like 50%. He shot like 50% from three. Couldn't fucking miss again, and he was hitting insane shots.
It's the game winner in that one game. Like, yeah, he's been. So I think it goes down to, if they don't make any other moves this offseason, I think that 15th roster spot probably does come down between Queen and Joe.
And Queen's guaranteed $300,000, which is very rare for a guy that doesn't make the team.
Right. So for that reason, I would think they are leaning toward cutting Joe, because maybe it's the same thing. Like we get his archetype is what we need, but he hasn't performed when we've actually given him that chance. Now, who's to say this offseason he doesn't take that step forward and come into training camp and like all of a sudden he is knocking down 45% of his threes in the preseason. Like I hope that especially these like fringe roster guys do get some real run in the preseason, so we can see what they have to offer this year before we have to make that decision. If they don't make a 3-for-1 trade or something like that, or even a 2-for-1 trade, whatever, to clear out one of those roster spots.
So my thing with Isaiah Joe, like everyone acts like everyone's like, oh, he's actually never makes the shots. Like I've said, like, he doesn't make shots consistently enough to stay in the rotation, but like he's still a 35% career 3-point shooter on insanely high volume. He shoots like 12 threes per 100 possessions. Like that kind of guy, like eventually we know that the shots are going to fall eventually. That's the only part of his game I'm not worried about. Like everything else about his game is what I would be worried about. And like, I actually think defensively, he's going to be pretty good. Like, I think that he holds his own. He got posted up by Xavier Tillman in the summer league, and he made him turn the ball over. We also saw this with OG Anunoby in the preseason last year. Everyone worries about the strength, but I'm like, I'm not worried about the strength. I actually think he's stronger despite being a smaller guy, and we know he's a good off-ball defender. Like, I just think that like he is the 3-and-D. It would help if he was like 2 or 3 inches taller, because I feel like if he was like 6'6" or 6'7", there's no way we would ever consider getting rid of him. But because he's like 6'4", and he can really only play the 2, which is something that we've talked about them wanting to get away from, like I can see why they would be like, all right, maybe we just like Isaiah Joe is just not it. Because like Kyle Neubeck wrote a piece about like they're excited to see what Springer does, which we'll get to in a second. They're good with Reed and Bassey. They obviously love Maxey, but like Joe is the one guy that they're not sure about. And like sounds like they've kind of hedged their bet here. If Joe's gone, they have Queen to bring in, who was like, he was pretty good in some games in summer league. I think his role will be very different on the Sixers. I thought he was a really good passer. I think he's a willing shooter. I think he's a pretty good athlete. I think he does some interesting things with the ball, off the ball. He can shoot off movement a little bit, or at least it looks like he can, which is a positive. He can get out running in transition. We need a lot of guys like that because our team is still very old and slow, it feels like. But my whole thing with the Isaiah Joe thing is like, he's going to go to the Miami Heat and be really good. Like, that's just what's going to happen. Like, right. He's going to go to a movement system where or the Warriors or like one of these teams, and then he's going to be like a really solid like 7th or 8th man, if not better. And like, we're going to be like, wow, that we had that guy on our team and we just never fucking played him. Like, I see this happening with him. It just feels like it's going to happen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the hard thing is with Summer League is like extrapolating big picture takeaways from any of these guys is almost impossible because like they're not playing the roles that they're going to play when they're actually on the team. Like Isaiah Joe is not going to be the go-to shooter. It's like, come off the bench and hit a couple threes in the 10 minutes you play, or like Trevelin Queen.
His job's going to be so easy compared to what it is right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, to Harden's credit, like he came in and all of a sudden, like everyone just had a feast of open shots. And I don't think we saw a ton of Joe.
No, Joe didn't get like any run with Harden.
Yeah. But like, I mean, Harden was just literally just every single guy on the roster all of a sudden is having wide open three after wide open three. And they couldn't knock them down, but like the shots were being generated. Like Harden's assist numbers would have been even higher than they were. So I mean, I am hopeful that Daryl has one more move up his sleeve, which would explain why Harden's contract isn't finalized yet. Maybe he's still just like sleeping off the hangover from the Michael Rubin party, but it's like what July 14th now. I mean,
10 days. Come on.
Yeah. Like I'm not that washed yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm hopeful that they can find the spot for him because I'm with you. It's like he at least provides something different than everyone else on the roster.
Yeah. He will bring something to the table that we absolutely need. And like, if he gets cut for Trevelin Queen, like I don't know, like Trevelin Queen's 25 years old. Like Joe's 2 or 3 years younger than him, like has at least shown enough that I think we should give him one more shot. And then, like, if he's pretty good, you can probably extend him on that, like, Furkan Korkmaz number. Like,
right. Yeah,
give him that kind of contract. Yeah, like, you could get him for, like, $5 million a year, $6 million a year tops. Like, I don't know. Like, I just think it would be a big mistake. I think the teams that develop guys and keep their own guys that they got in the draft, if they are good enough to keep, are the teams that just, like, are consistently pretty good. Like, this is what those smart teams do. And like the Sixers need to like tell Doc to get his fucking head out of his ass and like give the young guys more of a shot because it's clearly shown to work better than playing the corpse of DeAndre Jordan in the playoffs over Paul Reed. So
right.
I am a little bit worried about Charles Bassey. He looked very bad for a good chunk of summer league. I saw him play pretty well in a few games last year. I dominated the G League. And I was like, okay, so he should be pretty much a solid backup big, right? Definitely saw a lot of concerning things there. His hands are terrible. He should not ever have the ball unless he's literally tapping the ball in from James Harden on a lob. Defensively, he's pretty inconsistent, but like he has his moments. I don't know. I don't really know what to think about Bassey, but I said it like this. I think Bassey's going to be the 4th-string center because you'll have Reed as the backup and you'll have Tucker as the small ball option when you want to go small. And then you'll have as Bassey as like the emergency option and he'll play in the games when Joel sits. Like,
right.
That's really all you need from him. Like he needs to be like what Tony Bradley was for us a few years ago. Like there's not a lot riding on Charles Bassey next year. Like he's barely ever going to play. And when he does, you hope that he can play better when he has to play with creators like James Harden and Tyrese Maxey. So,
right. Like again, having those guys is going to lift the rest of these role players that they're not getting the benefit of in Summer League.
Yeah, they had Grant Riller as their only guy who could like dribble a basketball. Other than it's like Isaiah Joe, Trevelin Queen, and Grant Riller. Not the highest level of offensive creation happening there. Last thing before we get out of here. Are you worried about Jaden Springer? Because I am now a year into. I liked him before the draft. I was like, all right, he's 18, super young, athletic, raw. He's shown a little bit of juice, dribbling, playmaking. Only thing that really has to come around is a shot. Famous last words from Sixers fans.
Right.
And I said, like, don't worry about it. It's the end of the first. Like, most guys at the end of the first aren't even NBA players anyway, so you might as well take this upside swing with a guy who's supposed to be a lottery talent. Blah, blah, blah. He's the same guy. Like, I'm concerned now because it's like, came to Summer League last year, played an entire season in the G League, and came to Summer League again, and he is the same guy that he's always been. He can get, when occasionally, his handle isn't great. He can attack closeouts. He can do the secondary things. No one respects the shot. He hasn't tried to fix his shot. He can't really shoot from outside. The main thing he's good at is driving, getting to his spots in the mid-range, and drawing fouls, which is not going to be a valuable thing to the Sixers when they have all these star players, and you're going to have to be the guy who is playing in that secondary, tertiary role. So I have and defensively, he's still good. Like, he's great on that end. And, like, athletically, like, he has moments where you're like, holy fucking shit. Like, the up and under he had in the one game, and, like, the vertical leap that he had at the end of that, I can't even remember which game it was. Might have been OKC or Memphis. No, it was the Memphis game when he blocked the shot at the Utah Summer League. And then he kept it in bounds. Like, he has these moments where you're like, damn, this dude's still 19. Like, he's going to be 20 next season, but, like, he's still super young. Like, I'm liking what I see at time to time, but, like, the things that we need him to get better at, like shooting and handling, are the things that he has not gotten better at all. He's the same exact player in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not worried in the sense of, like, he wasn't going to have a huge role, if any role, for this year's team either way. So, like, you basically drafted him as a multi-year developmental project. Now, is he worth continuing to develop, or is he like Zaire Smith, where he's going to be out of the league in 2 years? I don't think he's that bad, but I mean, like, he's only 19 still, right? Like, he's still younger than a lot of the guys who came to the draft this year.
Chet Holmgren, Paolo Banchero. He was younger than, like, all the guys that went in the top 5 except for Jabari Smith, I believe.
So, like, he's, like, so far removed from front of mind for me, because it's like, just stash him in the G League for 2 years, and then, like, let's see what we have in a year or two, I guess. But, you know, like, ideally, he will turn into something down the road, but they just, it doesn't really matter either way. And if they did whiff on him, it's the 28th pick of the draft. Like, it was a lottery ticket. Yeah. Right. Like, the hit rate down there is so low anyway. I mean, ideally, you hit on them and you find guys like Maxey, because one Maxey can change the entire trajectory of your franchise. And, like, or even Herb Jones. Yeah. Like, that was the best player that was there. But, like, I mean, it's easy to say that with hindsight. There was a lot of question marks about Herb Jones coming into the draft, too. Well, it's a bummer. Like, you know, Bones Highland going 2 picks before it, even Cam Thomas going to pick before. Like, that's where it's going to hurt. Like, should they have just traded up a little bit? But I don't know. He doesn't trade up. That's not his thing. He, like, never has traded up. Yeah. I'm not, maybe I'm not, like, so I guess I could be concerned about his trajectory, but I just don't care about it for this year. Like, it just doesn't matter. Yeah, I mean, they said they wanted to give him a shot at the rotation next year, and then all of their moves that they made said the opposite. Like, right, like, they went out and they went out and they got Melton, they got House, like, any guy that he could have possibly played at those positions. Like, he's not going to get a real crack at the rotation. Honestly, he shouldn't, based on what he showed in Summer League. Like, he's still very far away from being an NBA player. And I am only concerned because people yelled at me for this, and I don't want to look like an idiot. So, Jaden, please fire Keith Williams and get a real shooting coach. This man
is literally, I remember when I was like, that's fine. He has Fultz' shooting coach. It doesn't matter. And I'm like, no.
Oh, God.
He can't. He still has the same exact shooting motion, form, everything. And someone pointed out to me on Twitter, he just shoots it faster than before, so it doesn't look as bad. But, like, it's still the same. Like, the shot doesn't go in for a reason. Like, it's very frustrating when I understand the idea of drafting a developmental guy. This is why I wanted to draft Springer, because I wanted to be the team that does this. I wanted to be that. But, like, the Sixers don't invest in guys. Like, Maxey developed himself. Like, the Sixers aren't out there, like, trying to develop Jaden Springer and Isaiah Joe and these guys. Like, they're basically just like, you figure it out, you know? Who's our shooting coach? Oh, Dame's friend that we hired just to get Dame, and he's still here for some reason. I'm very much frustrated with the fact that they drafted a developmental guy and then had no plan for him and didn't really invest in him at all. And they're like, just go to the G League and figure it out, or we'll trade you for nothing in a year. It's just frustrating from that standpoint. But also, once again, 27th pick of the draft, lottery ticket. Like, what are you gonna do? Like sometimes these things don't work out, and like he's still so young that it's way too early to say. And like he's probably always going to be a second contract guy. But my hope is that he can either go to the G League and shine so that we can trade him to a team that will actually develop him, or that he can go to the G League and shine and he can eventually be a rotation player for the Sixers in like a year or two. Yeah.
And like, you know, they're just in this win now window with a coach who famously hates rookies or hates young players in general. Like,
in Doc's defense, Springer had no business being near the rotation. Yeah, he's like the only one. Yeah.
Right. But like, you know, they're just not in a place where I'm totally cool with just like keep these guys, you know, keep working on them in the gym, in the G League, wherever, and then like roll them out in a, you know, once you start losing some of the rotation players, because like that's just how these things work. You get too expensive, or like, you know, they all become free agents. You're not going to be able to re-sign all of them, and that's when you're in theory, this is what either derails, you know, big 2, big 3 models or keeps them going. It's like, it's not the stars, it's the depth around them just depletes, and you only have one mid-level exception every year to replace them with.
Yeah, especially when you sign 37-year-old PJ Tucker to a 3-year contract.
Right. Well, at least he's going to be under contract and he won't leave right away. I guess.
True. It's a good point. Yeah, that's the positive. We'll have him at 40 years old. I'm very excited.
Exactly.
But well, then again, we just traded Danny Green, who's not even going to play next year. So apparently those contracts are movable. So I'm not too worried about that. But yeah.
Yes.
So. All right, Bryan, thank you once again for coming on. You can follow Bryan in the description. Check out his article from Liberty Ballers that I will link down there. Is there anything else you want to plug?
No, I think we're heading into a quiet period, so I'll have some like apron explainers, and Peter tax explainers going on Liberty Ballers soon. And like honestly, I'm looking ahead. I'm looking for, you know, for Forbes in August. I'm going to do some stuff on the new CBA, the new TV deal in a couple of years, because I think that is where long-term team building needs to be focused on, is like what's happening in 2025.
Yeah, and the Sixers are apparently eyeing up that area probably. Yeah, I mean, based on the James Harden deal and based on everything that we've heard in terms of like them wanting to have flexibility, and if Harden doesn't work out, then getting another guy with Embiid or whatever, like we'll see.
Yeah, their books are very clean right now.
Let's get it. All right. Thanks, Bryan.
Of course, anytime, man.